I definitely have a time frame,
Okay.
but I will always start out by saying, don't give more time than what you're willing to waste.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Vibe with Viv. That stands for Vision, Inspiration, Belief, and Empowerment. And I am so excited to have you on today. I help you heal from toxic relationship heartbreak. So if this is you, I want to say welcome. And today we have a special guest today. His name is Dion Robinson. He is a relationship expert, and he will be bringing in a male perspective on some of the things that we've been talking about, which are toxic relationships and the man's perspective on that. So Dion, so nice to have you on today. How are
Thank you.
you?
Thank you.
Welcome.
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Yes, I'm so excited to just pick your brains and give us all the gist on the men.
Yeah. Yep. We sometimes we can be complicated, but
Right, right. Why
that's what
is
I'm here
that?
for.
So with toxic relationships, I really want us to dive into the aspect of change, right? We tend to see that people or women will get into these relationships that are not healthy, and they're waiting and holding on to this relationship, waiting that this man will change, whether it's their behavior, whether it's stopping the cheating, the lies, and then they're constantly seeking validation from this person.
Mhm.
Continues the cycle of toxic and unhealthy relationships, right? At what point do we see that this man will change or not change? And what does that woman do in that situation when they're holding on, expecting that this man will change?
Okay. So I know I deal with this so much with my clients that are dealing with men that they deem toxic for whatever reason, whether it's cheating, arguing all the time. And I always say this, that man does not want you, because a man that actually wants a woman, he's going to work throughout the relationship, and he's going to work on himself to be better for her, for the relationship. So I know dealing with cheating, which it seems like to be the number one thing that, women are dealing with, that come to me, my clients, one of the number one things that they deal with is a cheating man, which a lot of times when a man is cheating on you, he don't really want you. He's just not letting you know that, and he's just receiving your benefits. So, and then some men don't know how to say what type of relationship they want, because our relationships are not monogamous. You have about 6 different types of relationships, which is monogamous. You have polygamous relationships. You have swingers relationships. You have relationships where other people bring in another person. You have relationships where you get hall passes. So there's just so many different types of relationships, but a lot of people don't sit down and explain what type of relationship that they want. So a man could want a relationship where he gets hall passes every once in a while, but he's not telling that woman that, because he knows that woman wants a monogamous relationship, straight commitment, nobody else involved. But that man hasn't told her that, i.e., so now when he goes out and does it, he's cheating on her and hurting her. And she feels like he's toxic, which he's just scared to tell her, or for whatever reason, he's not telling her what type of relationship she wants. And then when a woman is approached with that type of relationship, it's not looked at in society as good to have your man have a hall pass, or be able to, or to have an open relationship and he do what he wants to do while she be's faithful. Everybody speaks against that. So with the type of relationship you want, if the person is not on the same page, if that man and you are not on the same page, that's going to be toxic, because y'all not on the same page with that relationship. It can be with many other categories as well. If you're not on the same page with what you're trying to do, you would never be in a great relationship, because it will always be toxic, because you will always butt heads.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think that if a man truly wants to be with a woman, he will make it known, and this woman will have no doubt, right? And I think something that comes up is, how much time do we give for this change to happen? Like, how long should we be patient? Because sometimes I've had clients as well, when they leave and they feel like maybe if I was more patient and given him more time, then things would have been a little bit different. What would you say is like an appropriate amount of time to allow for this change to happen and to see whether they're actually actions matching up with this person's words? Do you usually give a time frame, or you just kind of like once they're not showing that their actions and words match up, that's kind of it? What do you usually how do you go about with that?
Well, I definitely have a time frame,
Okay.
but I will always start out by saying, don't give more time than what you're willing to waste.
Mm,
And and I and
that's
I get
good.
and I get that quote from the financial aspect, because when you're investing money, they always say, don't invest more money than you're willing to lose. So if you're going to invest $100, make sure that you're willing to lose it. So if you're going to invest a year to 2 years in a person, make sure that you're okay with losing those 2 years. So I always say, when a man really wants a woman, he knows that he wants a future with her and knows that he wants marriage within those first 6 months. Now, he might not marry her within those first 6 months, but I do give a time frame of, if this man hasn't proposed to you within 2 years, then you must not be marriage material for him. He must not be thinking of you being in his future like that. So if you don't, so as a woman, if you don't get a proposal within those 2 years, I would say it's time to drop the relationship. And it's not and what is it? I can't think of the word right now, but it's not um, I can't think of the word. But a lot of men will say, you forcing me to make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not I'm not forced, but a woman is not forcing you to make a decision if she's telling you that up front. She's saying, hey, this is what I expect. I know men know if they want to marry a woman within the first 6 months. It might not happen, but I do expect a proposal within the first 2 years if I'm meeting your requirements of a wife. And so that's when she can ask that man, how soon do you believe that you would know if a woman is marriage material?
Yeah.
And a lot of men will say, well, maybe within the first 6 months to a year.
Yeah.
So if you get to that 6 months or to that year mark, and that man is not saying, you are marriage material, I'm going to marry you one day. He's not saying that to you, then you know that you are not meeting his requirements of a wife, and you need to start to exit the relationship, because he told you from day one that it takes him about 6 months to a year to know that you are qualified to be a wife for him. And if that's not happening, start
Yeah.
preparing to exit the relationship.
That sounds good. So what I'm hearing from you is, and I totally agree, by the way, is that if a man wants to be with you, ladies, he will make his intentions known. You will know, and you
Mm-hmm.
have no doubt. And if this person wants to change, whatever that may be, whether that's stopping certain character behaviors that you both don't like or you don't like, that person will do that for himself first and then for the relationship. And for time wise, you want to make sure that whatever you invest in that relationship, whether that's your time, your energy, you are okay with that time and not feeling like you're going to lose out on something. You're going to regret how much time you put into that relationship, because you can never get that back. And Deanna says 2 years max. 2 years max, and early as 6 months, this man will know if they want to be with you or not. So set yourself up for not having a healthy relationship there, okay? So now for the woman who is having a challenge of how do you navigate leaving a relationship that is toxic or unhealthy? Because something that gets to be hard is that we find that we still kind of care for this person,
Yeah.
even though we know that this person is not good for us. And then we're kind of torn between these two worlds where our head and our hearts don't match up. And it's hard to get them to line up, even though we know this person is bad and not good for us. We stay in those relationships that are toxic for us. So, how can we bring our brain and our heart to match up so that we can take that courage, whether that's to leave, have a conversation that needs to be had with this person, so we don't repeat, whether that's the waiting game or just toxic cycles of lack of communication, respect, love, those kind of things. How do we get our brain and heart to line up?
But you just have to understand that like whatever the toxic trait is in that relationship, those are red flags. So if you gotta, so if you dealing with a person that, let's say, always curses you out all the time, they're mentally abusive, that is a red flag. And that's never going to stop the longer you stay in that relationship. A lot of times it just gets worse because you didn't set a boundary for yourself. So you have to enter into relationships with a boundary. And if a person keeps doing those things, you have to let them go as early as possible, because it's harder to let them go the longer you're with them, because now you feel like you have that time invested. You done fell in love with them. You don't want to get back out onto the dating market. You know, a lot of people feel like they don't want to be lonely. They don't want to start over. They have this sense of, if this doesn't work, then what will? So you got to get out of your head, and you have to go into relationships with boundaries, because if you don't, it will always be toxic, and you will never have a limit to the toxic that you will take. And that person is not going to automatically change if you don't give them a reason to. Some people will change once they know that you're not going to take that, and you leave them, and they sit back and they analyze and realize, I can't keep acting this way because this person is out of my life. I want to get this person back, so I need to change. But if you never scare them with leaving, then why would they ever change?
I heard a few nuggets there. So I heard that if the person is willing to change, they will change. But if they're not willing to, you have to realize that those patterns will continue regardless of what you say or do. So you have to make a tough decision and recognize that, yes, you love and care for this person. And it is a hard decision. Trust me, I've been there. It is hard. But you have to know that you deserve better and you deserve respect. And the way to see if that person is willing to change is to put in some boundaries. So put some boundaries in place, see if that person is willing to respect that or not. And if they are not, then that lets you know that that person is not for you, even though you care and love for them. It is hard, it is difficult. I know it and I get that, but you want to save yourself time so that you're not wasting, your energy in that relationship. So just kind of recapping all the great nuggets there. And you brought something up really great that I wanted to talk about. So, what would be some reasons why, let's say, a woman leaves a toxic relationship and now the man wants to come back? What would be some reasons that would make this man want to come back after this woman has left?
Because, he realized that this was actually a great woman, and he realized that he's not going to find another woman of her caliber. So he needs to fix his actions and his traits, his toxic traits that he was bringing forth to that relationship, so he can get her back. So a lot of guys will understand what they need to change about themselves, because it's not like she didn't tell him. She's been telling him well before she was willing to leave, but he just wasn't listening. So once she actually leaves, he has some motivation and realize, oh, I can't keep doing this. This is a good woman.
Do you feel that it's because of actual change, though, or more of the fact that this man realizes that he can't maybe walk over this, woman like he used to? He can't just come and go like he used to. So he misses the availability of this person versus actually coming back with like a true intentions of change.
Well,
how would you know, I suppose, right?
Well, really, you really don't know why that man is coming back or for what reasons. Because a lot of times when men come back, they'll tell you, oh, I've changed, I've this, I've that. And depends on what that trait was, that toxic trait was that they were doing. You never know if they changed, because you can't break up with someone for 1 month and then that man come back and say, oh, I've changed, give me another chance. It's like, but if you do give him that chance and you see and you think that he's sincere and you believe in him, it's not quite changed yet, but he's willing to change his behavior. Because depending on what it was, you can't just change automatically like that. You have to be willing to change. And once you give him a second chance, then you can see if he's actually taking steps to change. Is he talking to a therapist, or is he talking to a relationship coach, or what are these steps? You just can't come back and say, I've changed and I'm ready. Like, what steps did you take to change?
Right. Yeah, you need to see the actions. I always say they'll come back for one or two things. The one thing would be they're coming back because they know only you can tolerate their BS. And they're coming back to see if you will keep tolerating that BS. Or the second thing is they're coming back because, yes, they genuinely see that they messed up and they want to make things right. And it is hard to know initially why they are coming back. But no matter what, you want to make sure that the actions match up with their words. But normally when you're dealing with someone who is toxic or a narcissistic person, they typically have not changed. So a heads up there for any person dealing with someone like that, they have not changed, and don't fall into the lie right away of them saying that they have changed, because more than likely they have not. If someone doesn't have a bigger why for why they're changing and they're just changing for you, that will not last. That's not sustainable, because we have to change for ourselves first before we can add someone else in the picture. So just to kind of add to that, any questions on the female's perspective, actually? Any thoughts that you may have had that you're like, I am just curious to kind of see?
Is there any thoughts on
toxic relationships regarding the female's perspective?
Yeah, well, I know toxic relationships, both men and women, they display some of these same traits.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, because I know, I give a little example of me growing up. It was always said that the woman was doing everything right, and all the woman wanted was a good man. There's no good men out here. And I grew up around, an only child. My dad died when I was young, so I grew up around my mom, and I saw no good men, even though she was good on her boundaries. The few men that I did see her with was no good to her. Some of my aunties, they didn't have good men as well. So when you grow up as a man, as a boy, you see that, and it's like, man, are all the women good and all the men are bad? But once I became an adult and I started dating, I realized, okay, women do some of the same toxic things that men do. Women cheat, women deceive, women, have masculine traits, whether they yelling or screaming at you, or mentally abusive, emotionally abusive. And I was like, to a point, I was like, I didn't know that. I was kind of naive to that because I didn't see that growing up.
Yeah.
But once you start dating, it's like, oh, some of these women are doing the same things that they say they don't like in men.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So they displaying the same toxic traits that men are displaying.
Right.
So
absolutely.
It's like an equal.
Yeah.
It's a 50-50.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. So with my mental health background, I always like to say, like, a narcissistic personality disorder can happen in a man, a woman, your neighbor, your school teacher. Yeah. And you may not have the disorder, but people can have different traits of a narcissistic personality. So you can have different traits at different times, and it's present in women just as it is in men. And I've actually gotten a little bit of talk about this, that I only talk about women who are experiencing toxic relationships and not about the men who are experiencing that. But the reality is that both men and women go through toxic relationships.
Yes.
Don't make one less more than the other. It just happens that I choose to speak on the women's perspective. You speak on, men and women's perspective. So it's real, it's not a man thing that's causing the toxic relationship. It takes two people to make a healthy relationship. And yes. That's like to say, if you're not, fulfilled individually, you know who you are, your core values, and now you're going to bring someone else into that picture, and you're both not in a healthy place, that's a toxic cycle that starts right there. So
Yes.
It can fall into this. So I totally agree. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. It's nice to know that from a man's perspective that you agree that if a man wants to change, that they will change for any woman that they want to be with.
Yes.
And for a woman who is trying to be patient, trying to give this person this time frame, let me watch and see how long, if it'll take him a couple of months to change things. You want to know that whatever you were given as time, you're okay losing, because the person may not change,
Yeah.
And getting your head and your heart to line up means accepting that these are red flags in their relationships, and you want to set yourself up for success by recognizing that you deserve better. If a man comes back to you after you have left a toxic relationship, it could be of one or two things. They may be coming back because you're the only one who's tolerating their BS, and they're coming to make amends, not necessarily to change, but because you're willing to accept that. Or they could be coming back because they genuinely do want to change and have changed and are taking the necessary steps, such as therapy or life coaching. But you have to be able to assess and judge their actions and not their words. And if you're dealing with a narcissist, it's likely that they may not have changed and don't fall in for the bait. So that's a little bit of a recap there. So for anybody who is watching, a woman who's in a toxic relationship right now, what advice would you give them?
That's in a toxic relationship, get out immediately. Like create, and if you can't quite get out yourself, talk to your friends. If you have great friends, if your parents are still alive, talk to your parents. And if you don't have any of that, seek out a relationship coach, therapy, something that's going to advise you and help you to get out of that toxic relationship, because that's not your future, especially if you've been in this relationship for a while and this man is not listening to you. He's not working on himself to stop the toxic traits. You have to do the work yourself to get out of that relationship.
That's good. Thank you. And if someone wants to find you, how can they find you?
They can find me all over social media. All of my social media handles are quote oneself. So my TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, my email, my website is all quote oneself. So at quote oneself, my website is as quote oneself.com. My email is quote oneself at Yahoo. And that's how you reach me.
Awesome. Wonderful. And what does quote oneself mean to you?
I always like explaining this.
Yeah.
So I came up with quote oneself because, like with everyone, especially in relationships, they basically set boundaries for themselves before the relationship. So a person that's single will say, I'm not going to tolerate cheating. I'm not going to tolerate physical abuse. I'm not going to tolerate mental abuse. But when they get into that relationship and they fall in love, they see themselves going back on their boundaries. And now they're taking the mental abuse, the physical abuse. They allowing someone to cheat on them. So I always say, go back to how you were and what you were saying before you fell in love and got with this person, and quote yourself, which means quote oneself.
That's good. I like that. On that note, guys, I want to thank you for joining us today. I hope this was helpful to you. Please share, like, and subscribe. Share with someone that you think would benefit. And I would love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment below. Until next time, that is Vibe with Viv.